Be helpful.
All right. Okay, we're going live now. We're live. Hello. I'm waiting for it to pop up on my other screen to see when we get up on YouTube. Got a few people waiting here. This takes a minute. Oh, here we go. Okay, I have an ad playing. Great.
Me too.
Hi, everybody. Okay, cool. Hi, I think we're live. Hi, we're here to talk about The Two Towers, and we have a couple new people this month, which is exciting. So I think we'll go around and let everyone introduce themselves so people can hop on. Oh, jeez, and not lose my
book's
book.
attacking you.
Who wants to be talked about very soon.
But yeah, excited for this. So if we can go around clockwise, I guess. And if everybody wants to, everybody's linked in the video description if you don't already follow them. You can introduce yourselves. And I guess maybe briefly, well, no, we'll do that and give people a minute to hop onto the live stream just to do introductions to start.
I think that's me. Hello, yeah. I'm Mel. My channel is a book fiend named Mel. And I'm from Tasmania in Australia. So, hello, it's actually Saturday morning. I'm time traveling.
Good morning to you.
Thank you.
Love it.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. And I read a lot of everything pretty much. Like fantasy and historical fiction are probably my most read. But I'm very passionate about a wide range of things in your reading diet, including age ranges and genres and all of that. And I'm also a big fan of rereading. So I'm really excited to be talking about this book, which is a reread for me.
Yeah, unmute to talk. Hi, I'm Rachel from Raids with Rachel. I have YouTube, but also Twitter, and sometimes I show up on Instagram from time to time. I read everything except literary fiction, I guess, and I run Feminist AF Book Club, so that's a thing that I do.
Awesome.
Love it. I'm Alexa. I am on the channel Alexa Loves Books with my husband most of the time, but if you want to find me solo, that's usually on the blog or on Instagram. And like pretty much everyone here, I think I also read a lot of everything, but this year, for some reason, it's been primarily fantasy. I was really excited when Bethany was like planning to do this reread because I was like, I haven't reread the series in so long. So for me, this is also a reread. I think the last time I read it, I must have been like 12. I was like a child who did not understand half of what was going on in this book. But it was so fun rereading it all over again.
Oh,
I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kristen from the channel Merrily Kristen, formerly Super Space Chick. I also have a YouTube channel, and I also primarily read fantasy. I did read more widely this year, though I tended to not really enjoy anything that wasn't fantasy as much. Nonfiction. I did have some good nonfiction reads. And I also have Instagram, and I stay as far away as I can from Twitter.
Probably a good choice. Yay, awesome. I'm so glad you guys can all join us. Happy Friday. Hi, everybody. Okay, so we'll start by kind of, and Alexa, I know you kind of briefly mentioned a little bit of this, but if we want to talk about like general thoughts, how we did with reading The Two Towers. If you weren't here with the first one, I want to talk at all about like your history with this. Was this a reread for you? Did you like it? And we can kind of go around and discuss. I'll just say this was my first time finishing The Two Towers, which is why I wanted to do this, because I had read Fellowship of the Ring before and I never made it very far into this. So, and I liked it. I didn't like it as much as Fellowship, but I liked it and I have thoughts. So yeah, anybody can go.
Oh, I see a cat.
Baby.
Yeah, sorry. Easily distracted by cats, apparently. Oh, another cat. This is like a match. I guess if you guys want, I will talk a little bit about. I feel like almost everyone on the internet who follows me knows this story about the Lord of the Rings and me. I started with the movies, which I think is common for a lot of people. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to try to read the book. So I read The Hobbit first, and that went well because The Hobbit is great. And then I read The Fellowship of the Ring, or tried to. I say tried to because I got to the Council of Elrond, you know, when they're all discussing how they got to the Council of Elrond. And I fell asleep reading it. And I fell asleep twice reading it. And I was just like, maybe I can just skip this part and continue on. Of course, you know, me being me, I was like, I'm just going to, you know, knuckle through it. And I did, and I finished the book. And I thought it was great, other than the Council of Elrond, which is like a weird thing to say now, having reread it and been like, oh, okay, I understand why this was important. It's not my favorite, but I understand.
Mm-hmm.
The Two Towers has actually been my favorite of the series. It was when I read it the first time. I don't know about now because we'll have to see how I feel about The Return of the King when we get to it. But it was really fun for me to go back to this book. I forgot how it was structured a little bit. Because I think I'm so used to the way modern fantasy can get structured, where it's like, we're with one person and then we'll jump to the other person and then we'll jump back to that. This one is like, okay, this one section is about, you know, these characters. And then next book, it's about these characters. And I was like, how did I forget that this was how this goes? I have no idea. It's the movie, I think. But I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I do think the one thing that I miss from Fellowship is the fact that they're obviously all not together anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it a little sad, because I'm like, I want you guys to all be together and to be doing this together. And they're clearly not doing that, even though it feels right for like which direction each of them takes at this point. I'm still like, it would just have been nice for the whole group to stay together for all of it. Even
and
though
do all the same stuff, but just still be together.
Yeah, exactly. Just get a little closer each time, like with every single thing they face. Hopefully not with all of the well, we're okay to talk spoilers, yes? Okay. So hopefully without all of the like loss. Like it can't be like a step forward, we lose another person until we get to the end, and it's literally just the one person left.
Yeah.
That would be a little too sad. But yeah, so that's how I felt about this reread.
Cool.
Well, this is a reread for me as well. I feel like I'm the opposite of a lot of people in that I grew up with The Lord of the Rings being read to me and then reading it. And then I was in my, I want to say late teens when the first movie came out. So yeah, my experience is the opposite of, I think, a lot of people these days. And so my perspective is quite different. Like, yeah, just because I read the books and I had a real love for the books, and then when I watched the movies, there are some things in the Two Towers movie that I was always like, no, that is not right. That's not, that you're missing the point in like some of the stuff that they change. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. But some of it, particularly in the Two Towers, I'm like, you've missed the point entirely. You have actually missed the point. Like, why are you doing that? Yeah. And then some of the stuff, even rereading now, because it has been the same. It's been been quite a while since I reread it. It was interesting to see how different some of it was from the movie, and like some of the changes they made, particularly around Helm's Deep and why they went to Helm's Deep and what that was actually all about, was really different, which I had forgotten. So that was really interesting. Yeah. Anyway, that's my take on rereading.
Cool.
This is also a reread for me. I think this is the third time that I'm rereading it. The last time that I read it was a long time ago, and anytime that I have read Lord of the Rings, it usually takes me like forever. Like, I'm pretty sure that it took me almost a full month to read Fellowship the first time around, and I have had a really crazy couple of months because my brother just got married, but I really wanted to be here for the live show, so I somehow managed to read Fellowship and Two Towers in the last 4 days.
Which is impressive.
Yeah. I was texting with Alexa yesterday, and I was like, my brain is broken. Like, I cannot read right now. Like, I need like a break. That was a lot. But it was really fun, and I agree. So far, Fellowship is still my favorite. It always was, and I think it will continue to be. I had also forgotten about like the structure with them being split up, and also Helm's Deep. That was quite different. But I really am so glad to like have finally reread these two, because I said I was going to do it this year, and then I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get to it because now we're getting to the end of the year. But now that I have two down, like, I'm good.
Do it.
Power
You
through
have
that.
to read the last one now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alexa, I think it's so funny you mentioned the Council of Elrond scene because you just like triggered this memory where it's like, oh my god, that was the part that took me like a week and a half when I was
Thank you.
like I had forgotten about that. And the last time, like prior to my most recent reread, the only time I'd read the series, which I also did not finish, and I will talk about that when we get to book 3. But like the last time I read it, I think I was like 10 years old. So like I did not understand everything that was happening. Like I vaguely enjoyed it, but like I don't think I picked up everything that was going on. So it was a real treat to come back to this series as an adult, and specifically for the Two Towers. I was really dreading rereading that one because even though it has some of my favorite parts, like I love the Ents, so I was excited about that. But I
Yeah.
was like dreading reading the Two Towers because I hate Gollum with the fire of 1,000 suns. Like I know a lot of people think he's like a really interesting villain, and I get that. I hate all of the scenes he's in, and every time we would watch the movies and we'd get to the parts of like him and Sam and Frodo like starving and climbing rocks, I was like, oh my god, this is so long. But when I finally got to the book, I was like really pleasantly surprised. Like I also think it's not my favorite in the series, but I think what pulled me through the parts with Sam and Frodo and Gollum is like I mentioned this in our first live show, but I just love Sam and Frodo as characters so much that like I actually enjoyed that part because there was like all this interesting character work and yeah, so maybe it was partly because my expectations were so low for Two Towers, but like I actually really enjoyed it, and I like that even though some of the plot stuff wasn't my favorite, it's like we get to spend time with like Frodo and Sam, and I understand why Frodo makes these choices, even though it's like you should listen to Sam about not trusting him. So yeah, I feel like I started out a lot more coherent with my thoughts.
We got you. We got you.
This is a second read for me, but the last time I read The Two Towers was I was 12, so that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I enjoy all of the books pretty much the same. They're all just sort of like one overarching story to me, so I don't really like feel strongly about like one part versus the other. So I feel pretty much the same about the Fellowship as I do the Two Towers as I do Return of the King. But that being said, I really enjoyed rereading it. I'm always surprised at how much Peter Jackson like took directly from the book and placed into the movies, and so much of that he did are my favorite parts throughout the series and throughout the movies. So yes, I really enjoyed it. It was great.
I love it. I want to quickly look at, because we've got like some conversations happening in the comments. We've got a couple people who really like Two Towers better. So
That was me the first time I read it.
Rachel, hug Art.
That's my cat.
Yeah.
No.
The structure is interesting. I also missed having Sam and Frodo for so much of the book. I was like,
Where are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That feature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
Oh,
my
I
whole,
agree.
like the thing that they
Actually.
misunderstood. Faramir is the thing that really annoys me every time, because they misunderstood his character so much by having him take the hobbits to Osgiliath. Just misunderstood everything about him and why he was different from Boromir, and why if he had been Boromir and been sent, it would have been a totally different experience.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I love Faramir.
I love Faramir too.
I kind of liked that. I kind of thought that it made him a little less one note, which is how I felt about him in the book, is that he's all good all the time, essentially. And I liked that you see the struggle of him knowing that his dad is like expecting him to be more like Boromir, and him having this internal conflict of being like, all right, I should be more like my brother, but I just really want to be myself and the good guy that I am. So I kind of liked that, but I do agree that it was for drama purposes, but I like the drama, so
fair enough.
It worked for the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it does work in the movie, but I think I'm the same as Cara. I just love Faramir, and I just really liked the way that he used the two different brothers to have, the two different understandings of the world and the the different strengths they both have, and I felt like Peter Jackson like missed the mark a bit there.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
with like Peter Jackson, he explored more moral grayness than Tolkien did.
Yeah.
And I feel very much like Tolkien really loved to talk about light versus dark and not really like about the in-between. So I appreciated that, but I also appreciate the books for what they are.
Yeah.
And I do actually like that so many of these characters in the series like are really good people. And I just think it's a good example of how you can have characters who are good and there's still conflict.
Yes.
Because I feel like there's this tendency to think that morally gray characters are the only ones who can struggle to do the right thing. And I don't think that's true. And I like that these books are an example of that. But I think that's harder to, I think that's a harder sell in a movie format, especially. Is like,
I agree.
Another good
Absolutely.
guy.
Yeah.
Everyone will just write it off.
That reminds me of like the end when Sam toward the end is saying that, you know, he was thinking about how like you hear these epic stories of people and he always thought that they were the ones like going out in search of adventure, but realistically, like maybe they weren't looking for it because they kind of fell into this and they had so many opportunities to turn back, but they hadn't.
Yeah. And his struggle with the decision that he makes when he thinks that Frodo is dead.
Oh my gosh,
That is
Don't
like
go
you
where
said.
I can't follow.
Yeah. And like you said, Cara, that's a really good example of like, like morally great characters are great and they do a lot, but you can be genuinely good and still make choices that are really hard and may not ultimately end the way you want them to. Even if everything about the decision you made was for the good, it still doesn't mean it's actually going to end up being good.
Then we have Pippin, who is basically chaotic good.
Absolutely.
It's like your impulse. It's like whatever you impulsively feel like that. He's the kind of character who'd be like, if you see a button and it says "do not push," he's like, I'm gonna push that button anyway.
I do like that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mel.
I was just gonna say, I love the way that Pippin is always that. Like even as he's growing and thinking more about what's going on, he still can't control. That's still an aspect of his character that just isn't going to change regardless of how much he knows and learns. And like even knowing that Gandalf is holding this thing, like there must be a reason for it, he still just cannot control himself.
That was the one thing he does where I'm like, this like crosses the line into like, you should know better. But
what are you doing?
But overall, like I feel like this is something we also talked about in the first one, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I was really impressed with how well written Merry and Pippin are, because in the movies, like I love them in the movies, but they're kind of, like you said, Kristen, like they're just little chaos monsters. Like they just cause trouble basically the whole time, and then they have a couple of like really great like battle moments where they're brave. Whereas in the books, it's like, I don't know, they feel very relatable. Like there's that part where they're like trying to figure out where to go, and they're like, didn't you pay attention? He's like, no, I thought somebody else would have a map. And I'm like, that would be me.
Same.
I love that part.
More of like an innocence about them in the book.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and I think I talked about this last time, that I noticed some of the things that Boromir does in the book, they have Merry and Pippin do in the movie. And I do think Boromir is a more sympathetic character in the movie than the book, because I feel like in the book he's like clearly being set up to be sort of this like Judas type figure, and you see a lot more foreshadowing of that in his behavior. So I just think it's interesting the way they did that. And Rachel, you were talking about like the moral grayness. I think you see that with him, that like he's this more morally gray character in the movie, whereas in the book, like it's, you know.
That's interesting.
Clearly he's not.
I had the opposite experience. I find him like, I find him a little less I don't know. I think I find him a more obvious bad guy in the movies.
Interesting.
But I don't know why. It's just having that like visual dimension of like him looking shifty the whole time. It's like, oh, what a plot twist.
Yeah.
He snuck off to steal the ring. Wow.
Well, that's funny because like I feel like in the book there's so many moments that are like foreshadowing that with him.
That's true.
I mean, like, he's the one who, because he's having a kind of a tantrum, like throws the rock into the lake that makes the monster come get them, you know, and they have to get, so like, and in the movie they have one of the hobbits do that.
Yeah, it's one of the Pippin, probably.
Yeah, but in the book he does it because he's mad, and then after they get out, he's like, well, if people would have listened to me, Gandalf wouldn't have died. Like, basically, like he's kind of a jerk.
It kind of almost, again, for me, that comes back to like Boromir and Faramir and the difference between like older brother, all the expectations, but also all the glory that's already like part of who he is because he's the older brother and he will be the whatever, not king, but I can't remember what they call him, but the head person in Gondor. And Faramir kind of gets ignored to a certain extent, and so is kind of allowed to develop a bit more of a character in a way than Boromir. That's my take anyway.
I'm thinking about the movie versus the book after hearing you guys describe him, and I think maybe what does it for me is in the books, like, Boromir, I think he has a lot more specific red flags where it's like, oh, he's gonna do something bad. I think in the books he comes across to me more like hot-headed, and in the movies he looks more sinister. Like, I remember like that scene where he and Frodo are alone, and it's real creepy. Like, it kind of looks like he's just gonna like stab Frodo and take the ring. Whereas in the books, it's like that scene still happens, but I feel like the other stuff he does, it's like, I don't know, I kind of feel like Boromir's like the dumb jock of the gang. Like, because like there's that part where he like blows that horn to show off, and Elrond's like, don't do that again. So I think he seems a little more benign in the books. Like, he does make mistakes, and like he has a temper for sure, but it doesn't feel as sinister to me, I guess, as in the movies.
Like, again, it's a good character making bad choices for good reasons, but they're still bad choices. Hello, sorry. Yeah, this is a different
Yes, I agree with this.
I love this. I didn't realize that all the Legolas and Gimli stuff was in the books. Like, like their competition about like how many people they take down in battle and stuff. I was like, I love the bromance.
I love their friendship so much.
Yeah. One thing about the Frodo and Sam thing, like, just reminds me, one of the things I really love about these series is like specifically how the male characters are allowed to be so emotional. Like, I love that. I feel like, like Tolkien didn't go into that whole toxic masculinity thing. He's like, they just lost a friend, so they're crying about it.
They're gonna cry.
Like, good for them.
Yeah.
They're gonna cry and they're gonna sing songs with like multiple stanzas. I love that Sam outright said that he loved Frodo.
Oh,
that whole piece where he says he loves Frodo, and then he says, "Don't leave me, don't go where I can't follow." I'm not gonna cry on camera. That's so embarrassing.
Yeah,
you're crying for good reason.
I'll be crying too.
I cried like a baby.
Yeah, and that was one of those things. Like, I obviously know what happens. I'm like, I know Frodo's not dead. I'm like, but Sam thinks he is.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter that whether Frodo's dead or not. It's the emotion pouring out of Sam that's making me cry.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes, you're being very helpful.
Yeah. I can't even say that whole line without like choking up. Like,
I won't say it again.
I love Sam.
I said it earlier and I almost lost it. I'm like, we're barely 20 minutes in. It's too soon for this. Like,
you can wait for like another 20.
Right.
Kristen, you look like you wanted to add something.
Oh, no. I'm good.
I apologize for my cat.
Or too afraid to sleep. I know. Oh,
it's so sweet.
Look, I also, it is interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if some people feel this, but reading this to me, sorry, I just saw something. Like, reading this to me, I feel like Legolas and Gimli's relationship feels like a friendship bromance type thing. Reading Sam and Frodo, I'm like, this could I feel like you could so easily read this as a romantic relationship. Like, is it just me? But like, I'm like, I totally can see how that could be a like a subtextual reading of this.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go where I can't follow. Don't go into death without me. Please. Please. Please.
I mean,
it's clear coded. You can't tell me otherwise.
look,
Yeah.
there you go.
There's plenty of fanfic that is exactly that.
I'm sure.
I can
Judith!
imagine. I can imagine. The
Exposed.
foundation for it is just too good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really emotional. Well, and it's interesting because you see, like, whereas I don't feel that way about Legolas and Gimli. I'm like, they're bros. They're like buddies. but
They're
like-
teammates.
they're like, yeah, but it's not like it's different. So it's, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I love that
I feel
relationship.
like their love is like so. Yeah, it's so deep that I feel like you could read a lot of different kinds of close relationships into it. Like,
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's true. That's true.
Best.
Well, and one thing that was interesting with like the way they deal with grief and stuff in these books, because I was talking to my husband about this and he was like, well, it was like right after World War II. And I was like, good point. Like people were grieving loss, you know? And so, I mean, like given when he was writing it, I think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Tolkien actually, there was like a foreword in one of the books that I was reading, and sorry, New York City traffic noises. He was saying that like so many people think that the work was influenced by the war, but he said that it wasn't. And he named like a couple of things that he said he would have done differently if it were inspired by it, which I thought was interesting because I also like kind of felt the same as you. So I was wondering like why he said that that wasn't the case.
That's
I
weird.
kind of, I think I've read something similar. I think like, because people were saying there were specific battle scenes where it's like, oh, this was Battle of the Somme and like that kind of thing.
Oh.
And I remember him like reading that he had specifically said like, no, I didn't do that. But I would be very, very surprised if the overall like portrayal of grief and like comradeship, I don't know, like I'd be very surprised if that wasn't affected at all, because this was a huge thing he went through in his life. And how does that not color a story like this? You know?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it kind of begs the question of how much your life and your experiences and your nature versus nurture, how much of what's going on around you just seeps in to your experiences regardless of what you choose to say you've been inspired by versus what you are inspired by without even necessarily thinking about it. But it's interesting that he would say, well, no, it wasn't, and I would have written it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I wonder, it could also be a situation that's sort of like in the middle where like he didn't consciously be like, I'm going to write a story about my experiences in the war, but I'm sure that the way he experienced grief was different after that. And so like I don't know, it's like, because you want to believe the author when they say, you know, no, I didn't do this. And I understand like not wanting his books to be reduced to like just processing the trauma he went through in the war. But like that you also, it's like when your perception or like experience of something changes and then you write about that emotion, like he writes about grief, like his experience of grief was changed by what he went through. So like I don't know if that makes sense, but
well, I feel like there's a big difference between like, did you rip off your battle scenes from specific scenes in the war?
Yes. Did you write the Somme?
Like we're
went through something that
I mean, like that's two very different things. So I feel like I like when I hear that, to me it sounds like I made up these battle scenes. I didn't just steal them from actual, like that's to me like how that comes across. Like I don't know.
Like I wasn't just writing a World War II story. I was writing about magic, and like there was so much. He doesn't, like you said, Carrie doesn't want it just to be an allegory.
So
there you go.
It sort of reminds me of how like he might have done it so unconsciously that if he were in therapy, he probably would have like realized like how you learn that
probably
you regularly are trauma responses. And you don't know until your therapist points it out to you. I think that Tolkien probably would have had that experience.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Well, and like he can be correct about, like obviously he's correct about what he meant since he's the one who wrote it. But like we've been saying, like if you're writing about a specific like emotional experience, everyone's going to come at that from a different angle. His angle happens to be influenced by what he went through in the
Right.
wars. So like he
Right.
can be correct about what he meant, and we can also talk about the context that he was in, if that
Yes,
makes sense.
absolutely.
Agreed.
And like you said, there's a difference between straight up writing the song
Yeah.
and writing a story that happens to have emotional resonance with other
Yeah.
people who went through the war. And I mean, that's part of what it is too. Other people that went through that are looking at it and saying, this is the same as what I experienced, you know. So
Yeah.
What Meg says, it's his way of processing. Yeah, trauma response. That's
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what it meant. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
That was his way
Makes
of processing.
sense.
And it's possible he didn't even know that. Like if that did
Right.
not occur to him.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily think about it. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There was one thing in Two Towers specifically that I wondered if it was maybe influenced by some things that happened in World War II, because there's mention of the Uruk-hai possibly being like basically experimenting with blending orcs and humans, which to me reads as like, oh, like Nazi experimentation on stuff, and like I that it made me wonder if there was like some level of influence there.
That's a good point, because I remember reading that he and C.S. Lewis were two of the biggest opponents to eugenics, like from the beginning, whereas most of the rest of Europe and America were totally on board until Hitler started doing it, and then they were like, oh, we don't want to be like Hitler. Let's like not do this.
That's interesting.
That's interesting.
That
So I would not be
explains a lot.
surprised.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's kind of wild if you think about it, that all of this, and I do agree, I feel like it is definitely his trauma response to everything he went through. But it is kind of wild to think about the fact that he so cleverly managed to write it in a way where this feels also like, for someone who doesn't know that history or that context, it's a fantasy story. And these things, you know what I mean? Like it's so immersive in that magical sense that it also can stand as that if you're not considering his history and his context. I just think that's so fascinating, because I feel like there are books that do that also pretty well, but I feel like his is one of the earliest for me anyway, like one of the earliest I've ever had the chance to read, where it's like, how do you just do those two things so well?
Yeah.
Like,
it's like a great reminder that like meaningful stories and like entertaining stories can be the same. Like you can get both.
Absolutely.
Very true.
And I guess like you're saying, you don't necessarily like he made languages, like he created this whole world with languages and culture, and how, like, in a way, how insulted would you be if you were like, yeah, this wasn't just me writing about the Second World War. Did you not read, like, did you not see my Elvish, or, you know?
All of the history and the stuff that he comes up with that's mentioned like in passing. It's not even part of this big saga. It's like, here's another side story you could read about elsewhere. Because it actually happened too, by the way, in this world.
Well, all the references when Gandalf is explaining things to people, and he makes all these references to what is supposed to be somewhat understood by the people that he's talking to. Like, maybe, I mean, he's talking to hobbits, he gives more explanation, but then when he talks to Aragorn, he just references something that he assumes Aragorn will know. So it's like this amazing amount of backstory, and, you know, he's all the mythology and everything. He has written a world where that's part of the history. That's just normal.
Yeah.
I actually watched like a really interesting YouTube video about Lord of the Rings, about how technically like Lord of the Rings is kind of like fan fiction of what happened in the world, because it's like Frodo's account of everything that happened. So it's not necessarily like completely accurate, but it's like how he experienced what happened.
That's
interesting.
That's
I love that idea.
He's like the one narrating it. Yeah. That's interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about this, because one thing that is interesting is, like, while it is the case that, yes, C.S. Lewis does like heavy allegory, I will say the thing that has stood out to me reading the books more than watching the movies is like Gandalf in particular is so clearly intended to be a Christ figure.
Oh yeah.
And in the Two Towers, there's even the whole thing where I'm like, oh, this is like Jesus. They see him before they know who he is. It's like Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and then here's the revelation. And like I was like, this is very Christ figure-ish. So it's funny that he doesn't like allegory, but like that part of the book is very like on point.
Yeah, the Gandalf stuff
Definitely.
is the most like
Yeah.
this is Jesus.
I'm like, okay, I got it. Yes.
I think that because Lewis was so shoved down my throat in fundamentalism versus Tolkien was not, I found it more palatable this way.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I just thought it was
interesting. No, like how he talks about theology is not just palatable to me, but interesting. And like the way that I view Jesus now as an agnostic, it is very similar to how Tolkien himself views Jesus. Actually, there was a quote that I took a note. Go me.
nice.
Where Frodo and Gandalf. So the funny thing about this interaction is that Frodo is remembering it, and he remembers it differently than how it actually was in the first book. So how he remembers it going is Frodo says about Gollum, what a pity Bilbo did not stab the vile creature when he had the chance. And Gandalf says, pity, it was pity that stayed his hand, pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And Frodo says, I do not feel any pity for Gollum. He deserves death. And Gandalf says, deserves death. I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give that to them? Then be not too eager to deal out death in the name of justice, fearing for your own safety. Even the wise cannot see all ends. And I was like, Jesus, is that you? I really liked that. I loved that because Jesus, as depicted in the Bible, not so much depicted by evangelicals, but as depicted in the Bible, is all about justice for those in need and like taking care of those in need. And I loved that was paralleled in Gandalf. I loved how he did that versus it's so overt that it's about, you know, the lion in Narnia being
sacrifice. Yeah.
Sacrifice.
Right.
I didn't notice it as a kid because I didn't notice any allegory.
Same. I'm with you on that, Kara.
Like, somebody had to like explain it to me when I was in high school. I'm like, oh, I feel stupid.
I was like, this whole time.
In hindsight, yeah.
You are not crying when that lion is dying. The evangelicals are going to be like, do you not care that Jesus died for your sins?
I mean,
like, whoa.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I love that depiction of Jesus, how it was just like this man being like, well, let's talk about justice, Frodo. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. I love that.
And like that idea of like not making yourself the arbiter or arbiter of
exactly
justice. Yeah.
Cool.
And then when we have the fact that the head of the wise, like he says, even the wise can't tell all ends, but it turns out that that's because even Saruman he's not wise. Like maybe the wise aren't even wise.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Saruman was some sort of like
Lucifer,
Pharisee, you know, allegory type thing.
Well, yeah, or like Lucifer. I mean, that was kind of my like,
Lucifer, you think?
Yeah, like falling from grace kind of thing, because he had like power and it was taken away, like stripped from him, and like I don't know, like that seems accurate.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know, but I like that it's not as like
it's nice
like
that it's for interpretation. That's for sure.
Yeah. Lewis didn't want us in any doubt.
No,
Tolkien was okay if we didn't necessarily get it.
I love him for that.
Oh yeah, I agree with what Meg said.
Yes.
Okay, so scenes that you particularly were a fan of in Two Towers.
Everything with Treebeard.
I love that that's
so
your answer. I enjoy the ends too.
The one that I just mentioned, and also the one where they're battling and Gimli and Legolas are like counting.
Still the best thing.
He's like,
Still
I
the best
like
thing.
counting, man. I love that.
Oh man, they're funny.
I love it.
They're kind of. I was realizing they're kind of like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of Lord of the Rings, aren't they?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
Also, love when Gandalf shows up to Isengard and like walks in on Merry and Pippin, and they're just like sitting there drinking.
I love that.
That's such a great scene.
Yes.
They're just hanging.
Yeah,
And Gimli's just immediately like, what the hell? Where's mine? You're supposed to be getting tortured. I'm supposed to be rescuing you.
Yes,
I
the
love that they
counting
kept the
thing.
counting in the movie. It's so funny. I didn't know it was in the book. I was like, what? Because I always thought it was hilarious in the movie, and I was like, oh my gosh.
I think that Peter Jackson gets a lot of credit for Tolkien stuff.
Yeah.
For sure.
I know.
Such a shame.
Yeah.
Like, I
He
mean,
had
he had
some
the
good
good,
source material.
taste to keep it, but yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I mean, judging by the fact that I can't even get through the whole line without like getting emotional, obviously, not that it's like an enjoyable scene, but it's like so beautifully done when Sam thinks he has lost Frodo, and
Ugh.
like that whole bit is just, I think that's one of the marks of a really well told story, when it's like, I know definitively he's fine, but it's like tears,
Mhm.
just Sam doesn't know.
Yeah.
I
Imagine
also-
reading that without knowing. Like,
I
imagine.
know. Yeah, it's been so long that like I know the movies so well because that was my introduction to the story, that like I don't remember a time when I didn't know that, but I'm sure I was even more devastated.
Yeah.
I
Well,
also
and
really
although
love,
it's funny, right? Shelob is in the Return of the King movie, so that's interesting too. That like the way they
Yeah.
structure it is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember when I was reading it. So I was actually desperately trying to finish it this morning. And my partner was watching movies, and I was like, no, I'm reading. But I was trying to remember because they do cut and change quite a bit of what's in. And the same at the end of, I think, the end of the Fellowship, they move some of that into the beginning of the Two Towers, or maybe the other way around in the movie.
Those two kind of just blend together in my head sometimes, because it just feels like, because I feel like Fellowship is so defined because it ends at like a very specific point. And then with Two Towers and Return of the King, like there are specific events, but I feel like, I guess for the sake of, you know, the cinema, whatever he felt was the best vision, I feel like I agree. Like he took a few things and kind of like it went.
Also, we made Helm's Deep like half the movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was very different. Like,
I read the Helm's Deep chapter and I was like, oh, that was it?
Yeah, I'd forgotten
I know.
how, I mean, it's important, but I'd forgotten how, like, kind of accidental it was. Like, they made it such a big thing of, we have to go to Helm's Deep, but no, we're not making the right choice. Whereas in this one, in the book, it was like, oh, we've got to go and help people, quick.
Yeah. I liked it, and I was like, I'm not even halfway through the book, and Helm's Deep is done.
Yeah.
We're done.
Like it's in the first
maybe
like
this wasn't that important after all.
Well, I mean, I get it though. For a movie, you want these big battle scenes and like. So I get that it was like for a specific audience. I just think it's funny. It's like a chapter.
Yeah.
There's more time with them meeting people.
Like
There's getting off, like, you know,
there's a lot of like we're walking through the woods and talking about something.
We're seeing these people in the distance. We'll have a meeting, then we'll keep going on, and we'll meet someone else. And I'm like, okay, this is lasting longer than I remember it.
Another of my
sorry,
I was gonna say another one of my favorite scenes is like everything involving Pippin and like saving Faramir, because even though I love Merry and Pippin for their nonsense, I really love the moments where like, oh, they are brave and they are competent sometimes. And like I just remember that part where like, because Pippin knows what's happening, he knows that like Faramir's father is about to burn him alive, and like nobody's listening to him, and he like runs to that guard, and the guard's like, oh, you can't go in there, and he's like, well, you either let me in and break your oath, or you have to explain why the heir is dead. And he's like, I guess you can go in. And like Pippin was kind of a badass, and I really liked that.
Yeah, definitely.
And leaving signs behind for them to be able to follow them.
Yeah, like they're smart sometimes. Good for them.
Yeah, there's a lot more, I think, to Pippin and Merry specifically, but hobbits in general, but Pippin and Merry than you whether you know the book, whether you know the story from the movies or the books, than you would necessarily have first thought.
I know this is actually like a fellowship thing, but just in like book to movie comparison, I thought Peter Jackson's was so much more effective when you actually get to see like the scene between Gandalf and Saruman versus Gandalf recounting it during the Council of Elrond.
Yeah.
Thing where I was like, okay, I'm actually like really impressed with how he was able to make this like better.
That's true. Yeah, because like a lot of it is like telling. It's like now we would call it telling instead of showing.
Yeah. My favorite thing.
Yeah. But you know, it was early in the writing of epic fantasy, so yeah. I love the scene where they're going to Theoden's court for the first time, and Gandalf is like, "Would you deny an old man his staff?"
Yeah. And they're like, if you're smart, you would, but
Can't be that smart.
yeah.
I love it.
That is a good one.
Is this where we talk about Eowyn? Because I love her.
I love her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's talk about Eowyn. Yes.
Obviously, I feel like the first time I read it, I was also like, I would like to see more of this person. Thank you.
Mhm.
And this time I was still like, can I have more of this person?
Yeah.
Or like, can she just be around longer? Like doing things with us? Like,
Yeah.
like take her, like let them take her with them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, can she
Yeah.
just
Make
come?
her
Like,
one of
you
the
don't have to
fellowship.
leave
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, she doesn't come up in the books until the Return of the King.
Yeah, like
Very
her
much.
big part
Her
is
big
like in
moment,
that
yeah.
book. Yeah.
Right.
Which is another totally badass movie scene that I did not
Yes.
realize happens verbatim in the book. Like,
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh,
I haven't
can't
read Return of the King yet. Like this is my first time making it all the way through
yeah.
Two Towers.
That's
So
good.
like,
Well,
I'm
Eowyn is
excited,
a delight. So
Yeah, she is.
Eowyn is fantastic. Yeah.
One of the best parts of that book.
it's also interesting because I didn't know how much was like book versus the movie, but like in this you can also tell she's like kind of into Aragorn, and he's kind of like, I want to be nice to you, but
yeah.
But
I
also
feel
to
so
let you
bad
down.
for Eowyn. It's like,
I know.
Poor child. She's so great though. I'm excited for her moment. I'm excited for it to happen.
Yeah.
Just because we didn't get enough of her in this one.
Yeah.
Well, and I love
I
too
agree.
how Aragorn is like, leave her in charge.
yeah.
Yeah, like you have.
He's like,
Yeah.
have you met
Oh,
her?
that's- yeah.
She'll be fine.
Yeah, like she's good.
What are you thinking? Why would you even look past her? Like, obviously. Yeah.
Oh, Aragorn.
I guess that's one of the things is like I think she's a great character, and I appreciate the way she's kind of being handled in the books, especially for the time it was written. But like more of her would be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like more female characters
In general, just that would be nice.
would be nice.
With big roles.
Yeah.
That would be nice in the main actual plot of this story.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, not just
Yeah,
like a
one-
passing role.
Right. Like one thing I did like that they changed in the movie is like Arwen actually did some things.
Yes.
Yeah.
She just
Yeah,
gets
although
mentioned so often.
Taking
The
out,
whole-
I think
Sorry.
that's taking out. What was his name? Glorfindel? Glowfindel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Glorfindel.
Yeah.
And putting Arwen in that was perfect. Also, they
Perfect,
gave her a
yeah.
whole extra scene that like didn't exist in the book. Taking out the ring wraiths. What were they called again?
Yeah.
Ring Wraith.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what they're called.
That whole thing was. I love that part of the movie, and that
With
didn't
the
exist
river.
in the book. So
Yeah.
I appreciate Peter Jackson for that. But yeah, I think that I agree with everybody. More Eowyn would have been great.
Like if this were
Yeah.
written now, I feel like reviewers would be like, we want a spin-off series following Eowyn. Like,
Yeah.
And he would probably
Yeah.
give it to us because he probably has a story
like,
already.
I know.
Yeah,
He's got,
right?
like, a stack
Yeah.
of binders, and he's like, it's ready.
He's like, here you go, take it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, I remember
Arwen.
being
See that.
surprised that like Arwen was barely in the books at all. Like we knew
Yeah.
about her as like a concept.
Yes.
Like, oh
exactly.
yeah, the beautiful elf that Aragorn's in love with, and there's like that tragic like separation and everything. But like she doesn't really do a lot.
No.
Nope.
Peter
doesn't even
Jackson
show up yet.
definitely gave
Yeah.
her a better role.
Yeah.
Although the whole thing with her health being tied to the ring, I was like, what?
That was wild.
Anyway.
Yeah. Let's see. Kristen, I feel like you just read all of these, so I just want to know that we're hear from you too.
Well, I agree that there's lack of female characters, but I do love Galadriel. I think she is probably one of my favorite characters in the story. Yeah, so that was fun to reread her parts.
Yeah. I love her too. She's fantastic. Well, and she's Arwen's grandmother, I guess, which is.
I always get confused with their family tree, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
they live a long time. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
You're always related to someone.
Her daughter was Arwen's mother. Well, the reason is it's interesting, right? Is you get these in passing comments that make it sound like Aragorn and Arwen met in Galadriel's court, while
Yeah.
So that's interesting when he was younger. Wow. Yeah. So isn't I want to say I've heard that the romance with Arwen is mostly in a side story that he wrote.
Yeah, it's in
somewhere.
the appendices.
Yeah. I think I've heard that too.
Yeah.
So it is
really
written. It's in the appendices.
It's
And
in
they
the
compare it
Everything
to
is.
they compare it to the whole Turin, I think. There's another story that's
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's right.
Is
they
it Baron
tell in a
Luthien?
song. Yes.
Yeah,
that's
Baron
it.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which Tolkien put on his and his wife's gravestones.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's so sweet.
And really emo about it.
I mean, for good reason.
Yeah.
That's just beautiful.
Yeah. One thing I love, even though we've been saying, it'd be nice if there were a lot more female characters or we got more time with them, but I do appreciate that we get 3 very different female characters. Even though Arwen and Galadriel are both elves, Galadriel is a very, I don't want to say power hungry a bad thing. She's very ambitious.
Yeah.
And we have that scene of her being tempted by the ring, and I just think that's so interesting because female characters, especially at that time, were not usually written that way.
Yeah.
And then I know we'll talk more about Eowyn in the third one, and I don't want to give away too much because Bethany, I'm really excited to hear what you think about some of the specifics.
Okay.
But I think Eowyn is such a well-rounded character, and I feel like she's such a great example of how there's a lot of different ways to be strong, and to be a strong woman. So I do appreciate that even though there's not a lot of women, we get very different women, which I think is cool.
That's true. Yeah.
I didn't think of it that way, but yeah, you are absolutely right about that. I'm just waiting for Eowyn. That's it. That's it. That's all I want now.
That's your review of the series. I'm waiting for
Eowyn. I love it. No, I'm excited. It'll be fun to finally. I just also I'm so happy to finally be reading these because it's been a big gap in my fantasy reading.
Yeah.
So
I actually feel like I'm enjoying this reread so much that I am finally going to tackle the Silmarillion. I've never read that.
I've never read it either. I feel like maybe I should do the same.
We should just keep
Maybe
going.
we could just just go to Silmarillion afterwards.
That would be interesting. I've heard they're a lot more dry, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It is an interesting world. Also, Kristen, I think I saw in one of your videos and then pre-ordered it, the special edition of The Lord of the Rings coming out.
One with the red straight edges.
It looks amazing.
There's so many pretty editions of the book.
I know. I have an entire shelf that is just Lord of the Rings. I can't even tell you how many copies I own.
There are a lot of great editions of them.
Yeah, there are. Anyway, that one's beautiful. I was like, okay.
I guess I'm getting more books.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're getting close to an hour. So other kind of things we want to talk about, or if there are people in the comments who have things you would like to see us talk about, let us know.
When we got to Eisenguard, I could not get the song from
Me too.
That's one of the songs that gets in my head all the time, and then just rereading it, it just has been on repeat in my mind.
Yeah.
And then
I feel
watched the video.
Yeah.
That's the legacy of
It's a good legacy though.
Yeah.
I will say, this time, and Kristen did this too, I think. I actually listened to them because the first time I read them, and then this time I was like, oh, let me see what happens when I listen to them. So I was listening to like the old version, not the Andy Serkis ones, which I also want to listen to, actually.
I know, I hear they're really good.
I do want to listen to those, but I listened to the old ones. They're narrated by, I think, Rob Inglis is his name.
Yeah.
And I was like, this makes it, like, I was like, I loved it the first time, like the adventure part of the story. Let's just pretend the Council of Elrond is like not in that. Okay, I loved all of like the adventure and the battle and all of it, but it was so fun just hearing him narrate everything and then sing the songs. You know, it just made it so much more like it was somewhere. It's for me, like if you rank it, it's like the movies are on one side, the books are on one side. This is like the perfect middle. Because it feels cinematic, but you're not watching it. You're just still listening to it.
I was listening. Yeah, I listened to the audiobook for this one also, and it was
very fun.
Yeah.
I listened to some of it on audio. I was swapping between, and I really enjoyed it as well.
Because I read them in 4 days, I listened to some of them on audio, I read some of them on ebook, and I read some of them physically. I was switching between all three depending on where I was at that given moment in time.
I can't believe you powered through them in 4 days.
I know. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I still
I'm so glad though. I'm glad you could like do it and join us.
Me too. I mean, when Bethany first told me, I was like, ooh, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do it. And then like 2 days ago, I was like, all right, one book.
Right. It goes by much faster than I remember, to be honest.
Yeah, they're not that, like, it's not that bad. They're not, I think like they seem more daunting than they are.
Yes.
Because they are what they are. Like, but then, because I was the same, I was kind of like, okay, it's, I love them, but it's good. But then I was like, oh yeah, they're actually not that long compared to, I'm also reading the Wheel of Time series. So it's like,
oh my goodness, those are long.
Oh wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
What book are you up to in Wheel of Time?
I'm up to The Great Hunt, which is the second one.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
I'm like halfway done with Shadow Rising.
Which is the fourth, right, Kristen? That's the fourth one, right?
I've been reading that one since like April.
Wow.
They're so long.
The audiobook for that one is 42 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I haven't even got to the slog yet.
Yeah.
That's
42 hours is not the slog?
No.
I will say for Wheel of Time, they are good. They're just long.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot
you need to like
he kind of took Tolkien's world building and like just went, I can do more than like
and then do you want more descriptions of trees?
Yeah. It's not even that too. It's like all the illusions. Like you're trying to piece it together with all the characters because they're doing that too. So you're like, okay, this person is talking about this thing, which was referenced like 5 chapters ago.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Might have forgotten at this
ago. Yeah.
Oh my god.
I'll never forget that Nynaeve tugs her braid. So
never ever.
Yeah. I feel like I need to just have a braid and just every time I'm reading it's being like
great.
do it with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just excited for the show. Looks
Me
great.
too.
It looks great. It looks
yes.
good. I think it'll be good. But I guess we'll find out when it actually airs.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I haven't. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, fortunately, I didn't grow up with, like, I think my problem with the Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings series, is because I grew up with these, like, some of my first memories is my parents reading these books to me. So it's like, Peter Jackson did an amazing job, like, and I don't think anyone else would have done as good a job, but it wouldn't matter who it was, what they did. There were always going to be certain things that I was like, no, just no. That's not okay. That's not how it happened in my head. You're not allowed to do that. Whereas,
I mean, which is always going to be the case. Feel that way about a book, I think. But
Whereas with like Wheel of Time or any other, like, I'm just kind of like, it'll be different. That's okay. It's allowed to be different. That's okay.
Because it's not the Lord of the Rings.
Because it's not the Lord of the Rings. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so funny.
I will say, speaking of repetitive things, I feel like I didn't have that problem too much with these
Yeah.
books. You know, like there was a tiny part of me that was concerned that the reason I thought it had taken me so long was because I felt like I was like reading the same thing over and over again. And I didn't feel like that at all. Like I'm just like everything that happened was something different.
Yeah.
And they allude to the same thing in different ways too.
Yeah.
Which
And I
thought
I
was good.
love these characters so much that like I think that pulled me through like I was saying with like Sam and Frodo and Gollum climbing rocks. Like
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think I had the same thing happen because I remembered that as like half their chapters were like climbing that freaking mountain. But there's actually like there's that creepy part with like the bodies under the water, which I think they adapted so well because that creeps me out every time.
It does.
Every
yeah,
time I
yeah.
see that or read it now, it like so there actually is like a lot of different stuff happening, and even though like yeah they're working towards like the same goal for the entire book, like you get to spend time like again like I just am so impressed with how well Frodo was written because even though Elijah Wood did like a great job in the movie, I think like the things that I love about Frodo are the things you can't really show in a movie because they're like the way that he like thinks about the world and like Rachel, that quote you read where Frodo is remembering how he was like, well, we should just kill Gollum, and then how he gets to a point by this book where like he's not willing to do that, and even though he knows that there's like a very strong chance Gollum wants to kill them, he's like not willing to bring himself to do that, and like seeing him struggle against the ring and like how much of the decisions he's making is him and how much is the ring and like him and Sam and like all of that is so great that I'm like, okay, you can climb rocks while we talk about this.
Yeah, like there's so much character development that happens while they're climbing rocks that you don't much mind that all they're doing is climbing rocks.
Yeah,
you
like
forget that they're doing that.
Yeah, or even like the different like battle scenes or like the siege scenes, because that was another thing I was worried would be super repetitive. But like there's such beautiful lines in that and it's like a meaningful battle scene. It's not just like and everyone slashes at each other because that's what happens in epic fantasy.
Also short. Like which I think that's part of why Two Towers was always my least favorite of the movies, honestly.
Yeah.
Is I was like, okay, can we be done with the battle scenes? Like I get it.
Like they're fighting.
Yeah.
And it's a desperate battle.
Yeah. And like even those quiet moments are like written so beautifully that they like stand out to me. Like there's that one part with Pippin, I think, where he's like thinking about like the next morning they're going to have the battle, and he's like thinking about how like he doesn't feel hopeful but he's doing it anyway, which is its own kind of hope, and it's just like so beautiful.
I feel like all the hobbits have that moment, you know, where they're all like they're questioning like, why am I even here, why am I doing this, and then they ultimately decide like, no, we're still gonna do it. Like I love that about hobbits. I'm just like they're like we're gonna do it.
They have that kind of bravery that's like they're hoping it's going to make a difference, but they don't know that it is, and they're doing it anyway because
I know. Sam and Frodo do that, and they're like, maybe one day people say, tell me the story about Sam and Frodo, and I'm like, no.
I always get sad at that part because I'm.
And they're like, even if we make it, no one will know. And I'm just like, but we're gonna keep going. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, like all the stuff about like hope in like the darkest times, and how like even when you don't have hope and then you do the right thing anyway, and that's hope too. It's just like
too good.
Yes, definitely.
Rock descriptions.
I mean, that's fair.
I'm glad it's not just me who is like, this is a lot of rocks.
I remember that because I've read these books a ridiculous amount of times that until this rereading I would like, I'll just read my favorite parts. So the rock climbing was often skipped, and I'm really glad that I reread it because there is so much character development that happens, and you really get to understand, you know, what they're doing and why they're there, and like you said, that they get to that point every time. They all do it. They get to a point where they're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore, but it's what I said I would do, so I'm doing it.
Which again feels probably influenced by having been in World War II, because I feel like that's so much of like how a lot of people handled things for that too, based on movies I've seen anyway.
I mean that is the general feeling I get, because a lot of everyone who enlisted, whether it's voluntary or you weren't volunteering. I feel like that's the thing. You don't know how it's going to end for you, and you don't know if it's ultimately going to save the people you love or the place you love.
Yeah.
So that vibe totally comes across in the Two Towers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you do it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just like an ordinary tiny part of the world trying to make it a little better is basically what
That's
they're
like
going for.
that's the one of the themes in this series that like I love the most. Like that is so important to me, and that's something that really took me rereading these as an adult, because like as a kid I don't think I had any particular like feeling about that, but like reading this now, like one of my favorite character archetypes, or like I don't know, I guess kind of themes, is like ordinary people being good and like changing the world, and even if it's not the whole world and it's just one little piece of it, and like that I just think is so beautifully done in these books. And like even though Frodo in a way is kind of the chosen one, he's also not, because he's so ordinary and it's kind of chance, and yet he has all of this bravery that feels like a regular person's bravery, because he doesn't have magic powers. Like there's nothing about him that makes him like more qualified except his good heart. And it just like I love
Frodo.
how I love how these books like celebrate like ordinariness, and how there can still be a lot of like strength and beauty in that.
I love
and that like the most powerful people are the people who can't really do this because they're the most tempted by the power of the ring. That it's like their very ordinariness and lack of power that makes them perfect for this task.
Yeah.
I love it when Sam and Frodo are having that conversation about stories, and Sam kind of, like you said, he talks about the idea that this is a story that is happening and we've just stepped into it for a while, and then like we'll do whatever we can, but the story will keep going whether we do or not. And I just really like the idea that this is important moment to be part of, but it's
just part of the bigger, like it's part of the ongoing story basically.
And you see that reflected in the other characters. Like I mean, Frodo and Sam have the most like obvious contribution
of course
to the goal, but it's like with all of the perspective characters, like I think Merry and Pippin, you still see it's like, I mean, Pippin stepping in to save Faramir's life is obviously a huge deal for Faramir. But it's like in the scheme of things, it's like, well, he's not trying to save the whole world, but he changed one person's life.
Part of it.
And like that's huge. And like seeing, I mean, I feel like even the glimpses we get of people who are like, I don't know, like tertiary characters, or like even less important in the story than that, it's like they don't feel unimportant. Like even like the random guard that like Pippin makes friends with, and it's like, I hope he's okay, I'm invested in him now.
It's a cascading effect. That's kind of what it feels like one of them makes a choice, it just cascades down to the even the whole thing with Gollum, like the choice that Gandalf and Aragorn made all that time ago, like it cascaded down to where it is currently. So it's just interesting. It's always like cascading down.
I think Gandalf actually says that about Merry and Pippin when he's talking about them coming to Fanghorn, and he says they were like the little rocks that start an avalanche. And
I love that.
Cool.
So good.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad it went well. We all enjoyed it pretty well. I'm excited for Return of the King next month.
I'm excited to see what you think, Bethany. Wait, is everyone else just rereading it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Other than I think Michelle couldn't be here tonight, but she should be here next month, and I think this is her first time reading any of the books.
Then I'm excited for both of you. Look, I still have the movie version of the Moss Market.
Wow.
With Orlando Bloom's face on it.
I love it.
Best cover.
This is the one I originally read. You can tell.
Mine's
my
not the
one's
movie
completely-
version, but it's
Oh,
this
that's
little
great. I
this
love
little
that one.
chunky
I
Moss
love
Market.
that.
I love it.
I love it. It's awesome.
Yes. Oh, exciting.
Oh, awesome.
Return of the King is so good.
I'm
Lots of
excited.
things happen.
Yeah, I'm excited to see like differences, and I need to go back and rewatch the movies at
Me
some point
too.
too. It's been so long since I've seen them.
Yeah.
I wish I'd
I
had the time
watch
to
them
do it.
like at least twice a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Extended editions. And Andrew and I, we always start, like, we'll start watching Fellowship, we'll watch it through, and then like a month will go by, and he'll be like, we have to watch Two Towers. And I'm like, it's been a month. Why don't we just watch Fellowship again? We end up watching Fellowship like 10 times a year.
I love Fellowship. Actually.
The movie is really good.
Yeah.
And then when you watch the second one, you just have to go straight to the third. So you're
Yes.
basically
Yeah.
binging.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
still need to see the extended edition. I'm like
Oh my
really
God.
excited.
Oh,
Oh, they're
Watch
so
it
good.
any other way.
Yes.
No,
After you watch it that way once, you'll never want to do it
That's
the other
what
way.
I've heard
No.
from
Never
people.
will
Yeah.
watch it again. Yeah, not any other way.
No, there's no way. My sister, who is not even a fantasy fan, loves the extended editions. Like, she's like,
Isn't that
this is
funny? Like my mom hates fantasy, and yet like Lord of the Rings is one of her favorite things. I'm like, how do you like one of the most definitive?
I mean,
the fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
people like what they like. I don't know.
Oh, watch the movies. Yes, definitely watch the
Yeah.
movie.
Oh
They're
wow. You should
I've never
definitely-
watched all of like the commentary, and I've always wanted to do that.
Maybe you should do that this time, Kristen.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that'd be fun. Yeah, I might go do it. I've watched way more movies than usual this month, but they've all been horror movies for like a vlog project I'm doing, which was fun actually.
Have you had any favorites? Like, or were there any you particularly liked?
Let's see. So one that I don't think I expected to find so funny.
Okay.
was, I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh my God.
Oh
I
yeah.
haven't seen that movie in years.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, I think if I had watched it as a teenager, I would have probably been kind of creeped out by it. But like watching it now as an adult, like it's so funny.
That definitely did scare me, but the last time I saw it, I think I was in like 6th grade. So
Does that one happen during prom?
No, it's
Or am I thinking of okay?
summer.
No, but there is like a beauty pageant competition thing.
Okay,
That
that's
it
not
starts
the one I'm
with.
thinking of.
And like there's this
The guy with the
scene-
hook.
Yeah. So there's a scene that like I literally like burst out laughing.
Oh, God.
Where Sarah Michelle Gellar, she wakes up and like the guy's been in her room and like all her hair is cut and she has her crown on her.
Like,
And then she gets mad and like punches the mirror. She freaks out and screams because her hair was cut. So funny.
I feel like I have to rewatch it now.
I know, me too. I'm like, should I rewatch it? Because I do remember
Yeah.
being scared when I watched it the first time, but I was so
Yeah.
young.
Well, that's the thing is like I think if I had seen it when I was young, it would have freaked me out. But watching it now, I'm like, oh, this is so like 90s teenagers, and like it's pretty entertaining.
It
so.
might be the only horror movie I could handle, so I'll keep it in mind.
I mean, she's
And Screams are pretty.
Oh, I love
I
it.
always have
I haven't
those two
seen
in
that
my
one yet.
head. Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's a like comedy
Really
type
good.
of yeah, it's really good.
Well, I decided because I realized I had never seen any slashers because I thought I wouldn't like them because they like the idea of it always freaked
How are
me
you
out,
doing
and
with them?
I have been so pleasantly surprised. Like I really enjoy them.
Which is a funny thing to say.
Which is weird. Well, so I first it started with I had read. I know this is not Lord of the Rings related.
I
Sorry,
know,
guys.
sorry.
But so I read My Heart Is a Chainsaw by Stephen
Oh,
Graham
yeah.
Jones, which is like kind of a love letter to slasher films, and it has a lot of information like for people like about the genre and the tropes and like why they do the things they do. And I was like, this is really interesting, and I love this book. Maybe for like October, I'll do a thing where I like watch a bunch of stuff that I haven't seen before and like see how it goes. And so I've watched a few. Like we did a patron movie night with the original Halloween from the 1970s, which was
Oh.
fun.
Cool.
And like I enjoy them. I think they're interesting. So,
Slasher is
That's
actually the one
funny.
I can't do.
When I was younger, my group of friends, we rented a horror movie from Blockbuster. aging myself. Like literally every single weekend we would get at least like 2 or 3. I think I did everything in the horror section. And now as an adult, I'm like, I can't. Like I like to see wholesome, like funny things.
It's like I spend my life trying not to have anxiety, thank you.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure, the world is stressful enough.
I mean, I find it, like, I find them strangely cathartic, especially I think the slashers, because they have this like you kind of know that somebody, like the final girl is going to make it to the end and she's going to take down the guy, and like I find that it's kind of comforting in a weird way.
I theoretically understand that, because that's like when I'm in the mood to like read as escapism, which often happens. Like I either go for something super cozy and wholesome, or I'm like, I want to read about somebody whose problems are so much worse than mine that I like forget about what's going on. So like I get that. Like
yeah. Anyway, it's been an interesting experience because like I had never seen any of these, so I have like
look forward to finding out what else you watched. I'm curious now.
It was fun. I think I'm going to do this like every October, where I'll like pick like 5 movies that I haven't seen, because I never watched horror growing up. I wasn't allowed to, and then I was too scared by it, and so I'm like,
there's so many different like subcategories you can go into too, which would make it a very interesting experience.
Yeah. Well, I did it last year too. Like last October, I did a video where I watched like some things, but that ranged from like Hocus Pocus, which I
love Hocus Pocus.
Like I hadn't seen that, and I watched like Crimson Peak, and like anyway, it was fun. It's fun to like okay, a reason to like go back and watch stuff I haven't seen. So
yeah.
Oh no, I'm seeing somebody didn't like Mexican Gothic. What? No, it's okay. I know
loved that one.
I did too. It is polarizing though. I get it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, but it made me realize that I don't like body horror.
Same.
So, yeah.
I was like, nope, never doing that again.
Horror, so it is strange to me that I got on with Mexican Gothic as well as I did, because like, one of the reasons I don't do any horror is because I hate body horror.
Yeah.
I
really enjoyed it too.
With the body horror, like it's so dependent on like what specifically is happening, and Mexican Gothic didn't bother me for that. But I was one of the rare people that found that book like very middle of the road, and I gave it 3 stars.
Oh no, me too. I also gave it a 3. I
was just like, it was fine.
Yeah, same. I think it also didn't help that I knew a lot of people who really loved it.
Like me.
I always worry about overhyping things I love.
It's hard.
I think that I read it thinking like, okay, I'm setting myself up like with the plot, thinking that certain things are going to happen, and I was really excited to see those come to fruition. And then she went different directions with all of them, and I was like, oh, I don't like any of these things that you're doing. This is just fine. My ideas were better.
Should be like, I should write one.
You should have asked me.
Consult me the next time.
I also
do like
really
her writing.
Like the dude. I was like, personally, I was like really hoping for. Never mind. I don't want to spoil anything.
Let's not.
I was hoping that the ending would go a different way. It did not go that way, and therefore it got 3 stars. I will say that. There we go.
Now I'm curious. You're gonna have to tell me later, because I'm curious what you wanted the ending to be.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Oh, that is.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Oh, I like that. I'm glad that it's comforting for you. I like it.
All right. Well, we have gotten like very off topic, which is fine. This always happens at the end of lives.
I apologize again for the cat.
Please never apologize for your cat.
For the cat.
You
no
guys
one should ever apologize for their
3
cats.
They just wanted to be on camera.
Yeah. All 3 of them were like, what you doing, Mom?
You're good. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We will be back in a month to talk about Return of the King. Hope to see you all here. And thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.